for the 2024-2025 season, the Philadelphia 76ers have had an all-time awful start to this season. And a lot of people want to blame Joel Embiid. Others want to blame Paul George. People want to blame injuries and a whole lot of other things that comes with the Philadelphia 76ers. But I think that this basketball team is simply cursed. The Philadelphia 76ers are currently cursed. And it starts way back, right? It starts way back in 2002 with this viral video right here.
I mean, but it's easy to talk about. It's easy to sum it up when you just talk about practice. We sitting here, I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice. If I can't practice, I can't practice, man. If I'm hurt, I'm hurt. I mean, simple as that. It ain't about that. I mean, it's not about that at all. You know what I'm saying? I mean, but it's easy to talk about. It's easy to sum it up when you just.
And it was that small part of a 30-minute press conference or post or interview that went viral. We talking about practice. And Allen Iverson, right, just to give y'all some backstory. Allen Iverson was the number 1 draft pick in the 1996 NBA draft to the Philadelphia 76ers. And at 6 foot tall, if that, right, he became the MVP of the league in the 2000-2001 season at the age of 25. At 6 feet tall, maybe 180 pounds, Allen Iverson became the MVP of the NBA. And not only was he really good at basketball, and I mean really good at basketball, he averaged 30 plus points on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different occasions, right? And to do that at his size, a lot of people will say he's pound for pound one of the best, or some people will say pound for pound the best player ever, because size does matter in basketball. And for him to do what he was doing in the time when there were great bigs and great centers and forwards, Shaq, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, the list goes on and on, David Robinson, right? Those were the people he was going up against, and he wasn't a three-point shooter. And multiple time scoring champion. I mean, just an unbelievable player. In the year that he won MVP in 2000-2001, he took his Philadelphia 76ers team that, let's just be honest, right? No disrespect to any of those guys on that team. They didn't have a lot of talent. And their entire game plan was based around Allen Iverson. And so this is the guy that's in that interview. We talking about practice. And let's go back to what that actually was, right? Because that interview took place In the following season, the year after he was the MVP and they made it to the NBA Finals and lost 4-1 to the LA Lakers, right? The only team to give the Lakers a loss in that playoff run, right? But 2001-2002 NBA season, right? And in that season, they didn't do that well. The Philadelphia 76ers in that year just did not do well. And let's take a look at this right here. They went 43-39 and lost in the first round to the Boston Celtics 3-2, right? And this interview took place a couple days after, which is what apparently happened was they had a team meeting. Allen Iverson was late at the meeting, and him and Larry Brown had a screaming match, right? It was apparently what happened, and then he had this interview later on that day. So this was 4 games after they got bounced out of the playoffs. And in this interview, he was talking about the fact that they're talking about practice and they just got bounced out of the playoffs. He talks about how much of a loss he's been going through. Not just in basketball, right? To go from an NBA Finals appearance to losing in the first round of the playoffs is a big dip, right? He went from the MVP of the league to 9th in the votings in one season, right? So there was a big drop. And his coach was calling him out for practice, for being late, right? And he had lost his best friend earlier in that year as well, too. So a lot was going on in his life. And reporters were accusing him of being drunk, which he had denied. And like I said, a lot of people only know that interview for the 15, 20 seconds of him saying, we talking about practice, until you watch the full interview. And his big thing is the fact that he's not the franchise player of that team. And I think a lot of people were confused as to what he meant by that. And he said, I know I'm the best player on this team. I feel like I'm the best player on this team. But I'm not the franchise player. And he continued on to say that a franchise player wouldn't be going through what he's going through, where he would be getting questioned about practice. Mind you, right? Mind you, Allen Iverson had missed 22 games that season because of an injury. He broke his wrist, I believe, right? Let's take a look at this. So you're talking about a broken left hand. And you're talking about a player that suffered a broken left hand and had to miss time. And so their record dipped. Him on the MVP ladder dipped. And it wasn't because he was necessarily skipping games or missing games. He got hurt. And what did he say? I'm not the franchise player of this team. Because a franchise player wouldn't be dealing with this. And he's not talking about the criticism from the outside, from the reporters. He understands that they have a job to do. He was alluding to the Philadelphia 76ers organization. And that's where this Philadelphia 76ers curse really starts. They mishandled one of the greatest stars that the NBA has ever seen. When you talk about an icon, a cultural icon, a whole generation of kids tried to play like Allen Iverson, dressed like Allen Iverson, got tattoos like Allen Iverson, braids like Allen Iverson. He was a cultural phenomenon. And he did that in spite of the NBA, who, as we saw in the Tim Donaghy documentary, right, about, gambling in the NBA, referees didn't like Allen Iverson because of something he had allegedly said to the referee. And so the referees were out to get him. The NBA was questioning and putting dress codes in. Partly why? Because of Allen Iverson. And so he wasn't the favorite of the league. He was just an undeniable star. And when you have an undeniable star as a team, you would think that you would get behind that person. And I get that players are supposed to get criticism. But the number one supporter of a star player should be their team. They should be the ones promoting you to be an MVP, to be an all-star. Hey, I get we lost this year, but he's great. We'll be back. Don't worry about it. But instead, his coach is coming out talking about practice to a player that has played through injuries, to a player that played hard as hell. You could talk about the shots, the shot selections, the number of shots, but you can't deny how hard this guy played. And so it started with him. The mishandling of Allen Iverson and their star player is what really started this curse for the Philadelphia 76ers. And when he left, when they traded him in 2010, right? His daughter was ill. And he had requested some time off, which they gave him. But at the same time, there were also rumors that they were trying to get rid of him, which they did. They traded him to the Denver Nuggets in 2010. And so when you think about an organization that doesn't have their team, their players' backs, they showed it with Allen Iverson.